one thing that I was not expecting that I found was surgical equipment, like scissors and clamps. So it
That's
was
a
like,
malpractice case right there.
well, I think what happened, and I wish I would have looked more into it at the time, but it was busy and I think that they died during surgery
Oh
and they had
no.
all the clamps and everything and they just left them.
So the person probably died on the operating table and they just closed them up without even thinking of taking that crap out?
They just left it. Yep.
Licensed attorney, award-winning writer, businessman, entrepreneur, and other over-the-top crap. It's Life and Law with Eugene Cisco Jr.
All right. We are here at Life and Law with, I'm not sure what episode it is. But anyway, I am so tickled. Um, we have with us Lauren, met her on TikTok, and she has a huge following and she works in the funeral mortuary business. But I'm being really awkward here, but I'm really excited. She's to date, she's probably our biggest guest. And I'm just so excited because I have a little knowledge about what she goes into as it relates to being an attorney and the kind of things involved in death and what happens when someone dies. She's on the actual working end of it. She sees the practicality of people dying and selecting a casket and how they want to be prepared, all of those things that I don't really know anything about. I just have the front end when I see people die and, you know, what they thought was a steady, solid family really goes all to hell and a lot of the things that I see. And you might see some of that too. So, Lauren, want to ask you to introduce yourself, tell the audience about a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so my name is Lauren. I go by Lauren the Mortician online. I'm 31 years old and I have been in and around the funeral industry my entire life since I was 9 months old. Um, and I make content online to help normalize death.
And that's a good way to put it because the way that I see it as a lawyer, it's this scary thing that no one ever wants to talk about. It is one of those things that when I talk about people, usually I only ask someone if they have a will. When someone calls me and say my father's really sick or my uncle's really sick, first thing I say, do they have a will? Well, no. Well, you need to get one. Do that stuff now. But people avoid. That's the saying, they avoid death like the plague.
Yeah.
They really do. And so when you say normalize it, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we as a society we like to avoid things that don't feel good. Death doesn't feel good. So when we have someone of ours, a loved one, a family member that dies, it makes us really sad, it makes us depressed, and it at the end of the day it just doesn't feel good. So we avoid talking about that, and for some reason as a society we've really just shunned away from discussing it with our parents. Sometimes our parents don't want to talk about it, and it's such an important thing to discuss. So by making content online, I have found that I've gotten really nice messages from people saying, thank you. Your content is actually what opened the door. I sent it to my parents, and now we are in the process of pre-planning their funeral. And we just thank you for helping to normalize it, helping us to start the conversation, because it can be a hard thing to talk about because we don't want to think about our parents no longer being with us anymore. That's
Or
sad.
your
That's
own
hard.
kids. I mean, if you
Oh,
take it down to your own children, you've got children. I
mm-hmm.
have children. I've got grandchildren. And that's the last damn thing in the world that you want to think about. But I think you're doing yourself a disservice if it just doesn't cross your mind from time to time. And how are you going to deal? Like, what are some of the things you might want to deal? How are you going to deal with it? Right. So,
Yeah.
what kind of, you had mentioned that you, that was, for lack of a better word, you fell into this career path because that's what your folks did. And honest, as a career guy, a career counselor in a prior life and an attorney, that is the way most of the people get around to doing the thing that they do, because think about it, it makes sense. If that's the way you were raised and you have a kind of an inside track on that particular thing, whether it's a doctor or a lawyer, I mean, it's really no secret. Doctors have kids that are doctors. Attorneys have kids, and engineers, and in the mortuary business, um, you're raised with it. You know the inside track, and you kind of have a leg up on someone that has nothing, no idea. So, what kind of education and training did you acquire to get to where you're at?
I have a bachelor's degree in mortuary science. The program that I went to is a part of the medical school, but it's not medical school. Anybody can go. And I did community college prior to get all of my credits that I needed. And then it was 2 years in the program. And then that's how you get your degree.
And so after that, and a lot of times there's an apprenticeship required in some of these types of things. Is there anything like that involved with your
Yep.
particular field?
I had to do a 2 year apprenticeship and then I was licensed right out the gate. I also had to take a national board exam after I graduated school. So you want to take that right away. I took that, passed it, and then you have to take the state test. So I took the state test. You can do that all during your apprenticeship. And then as soon as you've passed both of those things, you've paid your fees, you get licensed immediately after your apprenticeship is done. And the thing about apprenticeship is that you're doing everything that a funeral director would do.
It's the best way to
Yeah.
get your foot in the door in any career. I tell people apprenticeships, internships, the absolute best way to get a gig, for a career.
Yeah, I have people ask me all the time. They're like, "Can I work at a funeral home without a degree?" And I tell them, "Yes, absolutely you can because we don't have enough people going into this that want to do this as a career." When I graduated, there was like 20 of us, and there was only 3 men. All the rest of us were women that
No
were
kidding.
graduating.
So it's dominated by women?
Yeah, it's going to be a total industry shift here within the next decade, I'd say. If not already. Yeah.
Well, you see that in a lot of the professions, medical school, law school. There are now more women entering law school and completing law school. It seems like to me it's like around 60%, which 25 years ago it was not the case.
Yeah, and a lot of the old timers that are in the industry are now retiring. And how it used to be where, the kids of funeral directors, they would all be going into it. That's not the case so often anymore. It's mostly people that have decided they want to do this for a career and they go to school for it. I would say that's the majority of those that are in school. Because when I graduated, there was only me and another guy that we had family in it to do this.
So does the field of mortuary science, I kind of think that maybe there's two separate parts. There's the funeral home part of it, and then there's the actual part of it where you're actually preparing the body and doing whatever it is that the family wants, whether it's a cremation or a burial. So are those two separate, distinct things, or because I always seen them together. So can you do one without the other?
Yes. And in a lot of states it is that way, but where I'm licensed, it's one degree. It's one job. You do the both of it. But like, for instance, down in Florida, there's two separate degrees. You can be a funeral director where you just do the services, meeting with families. You can get your embalming license. So some states wrap it together and some separate it so you can do one or the other. And then usually what leads into the next question is, so are you a funeral director or are you a mortician? Or are you an undertaker? What are you? All of those terms for us in the States are all used universally. So I'm a funeral director, yes. I'm a mortician, yes. Usually, traditionally, mortician means that you also embalm people.
Even though the skill sets are quite distinct. So when I think of an undertaker, I don't necessarily think of a funeral home director. I think of those as two separate, distinct individuals because the skill sets to me are different. You might be a wonderful embalmer, but not worth a tater at helping console or be empathetic or any of those human skills that you have to have. Correct?
Correct. Yep. I've worked with When I first started, we had a gentleman that worked there, and he was close to retirement age, and he was a retired police officer, and he ended up being working more in the back because when it came to families and being empathetic, he was just kind of cut dry meat and potato. Didn't
Who
have
knew a police officer would be that way? I mean, I
so
talk about police officers all the time. They're heartless.
they just get into a frame of mind, where this is how it is. And some families react really well to that, and then others don't. So I was more, when I was working full time, like the front person, because it does take a special person, and people can tell if you're genuine or if you're not.
I can see absolutely going through some of your content on TikTok that you are perfect for that. You are what I don't know about your embalming skills, but what I see how you explain and break down the process, and you genuinely seem to be empathetic, which is you can't teach that. You
No.
just can't. And it seems as though you have a huge heart, and you really feel for these people, and that's so. When you do that emotionally, among other things, I'm a former school teacher, and as an attorney, you always have to be sometimes firm and yell at people. I don't like it, but I'm developed a skill for it. And there are times when I just feel not well because I've had to do something and say things that are really against my inner core, but they had to be done. So if I look at what you do and kind of imagine some of the things that you're put in the middle of, how do you put that aside? How are you able to put that aside and go home?
Oh, do you kind of mean like the emotions and things that I see at work and then how to go
Yes,
home?
when you're at a funeral, and and maybe it was an accidental death and unexpected and those kind of things, even though I think, and you might agree, death is usually, you can see it, it's sudden, or it can be a prolonged. I think those are the two things, and that most often come to mind. And I think either one, when you have a big loss, it's bad. But I think if you see the train coming down the road, you can prepare yourself mentally for it at some degree.
Hmm.
However, the ultimate end is, to me, that casket or that service. That is the finality of it. So how do you handle all of that drama that comes with the kind of situations you're put in the middle of?
That's a really good question. And half the time when I'm working and I'm in it, I don't even know how I do it. It's like a frame of mind. I wish there was a secret that I could tell you, like some secret sauce on how I'm able to handle it myself. But I think that I find myself reflecting on why I chose this as a job. And this type of work can be very therapeutic to do because you are caring for people at their most vulnerable state. And it takes a lot of patience and a lot of love. And sometimes you just have to take those feelings and leave them at work. But inevitably we do bring them home. A lot of us probably need counseling that we just don't have time to get. um, because we work all the time. We're on call all the time, and it can be hard to make time for ourselves. So,
So have you found, though, because you work in a lot of these high pressure fields, and I would say what you're in is certainly a high pressure area. Do you find that there's a lot of people that are in this area of work, maybe rely on substance abuse and those kind of things to help with the psychology of the situation? Is that in your education and your training, did they make you aware of that particular thing, or is that even an issue?
they don't even talk about it in school or education, but I've been in the industry long enough to know that that's definitely true. A lot of us are on like anxiety medications or just it's a tough job. It's stressful. You might have families that don't get along, so you're also playing a therapist. You're like the middle person trying to negotiate with somebody might want mom cremated, somebody might want mom buried, and then they argue about it, and you're the middle person because mom didn't have anything set up. So you're really a mediator as well. I mean, you might have a funeral where none of the kids get along and you're the bodyguard. It can be a really stressful situation.
As a lawyer, because you've seen this, as a lawyer, I have been in the middle of these things to where when someone dies, first thing that happens is the fabric of that family is so really strong. And I've even seen really strong families come apart because the first thing that happens is I'm going to get a call and say, my mother's about ready to die. Used to, when I was a brand new lawyer, I would kind of talk to them and walk through them what's going to happen and all the process. And now I just cut right straight to the chase. I said, get your rear end to the house, get the shit you need
Yeah.
and the stuff you want. Because if you do not get there, someone will get there and take all the crap. Now, because there's no court order in place, you can go and get whatever you need, whatever you think you want, even though there might be a will. But particularly if there's no will, get what you want, because then if you don't do it, someone else will do it, and you might not even know where it is. So I hate to do that, but that's the practicality of it. And so you're like, and then they'll be doing them, that so-and-so never came around mommy or daddy when they were alive, and I damn sure don't want them at the funeral.
Yep.
And I'm going to go get me a court order to get them away.
Yep.
So you've experienced that?
Oh, absolutely. It's actually really sad because it's every week. It's the kids are fighting. They're fighting over the funeral. They're going into the house, and one of the kids took everything out of mom's house, and the other one's pissed because they didn't get to come in and go through mom's things too. I've had it happen with people that, we're common law married. Well, I'm really sorry, but the state of Wisconsin does not recognize common law marriage. You're in big trouble here. So now the kids show up to the house and they start throwing her stuff out under the curb because they weren't married. Her name's not on the house. She doesn't own the house. So they're chucking it outside. She's coming into the funeral home. She's crying to me. I mean, it's a huge thing. So you should really pre-plan.
Full disclosure, I don't have my stuff planned. I have a lawyer, but I don't. So if you're out there and you're listening, the best thing you can do, not only for yourself, but for anyone involved in your family, is to get together and get all this stuff worked out. Go to your mom or your dad, your grandma or your grandpa, and help them through this. Even though you do that, doesn't necessarily mean, from my perspective, doesn't mean it's going to work out, right? Because you've seen them to where they've had these, we've got a will and they're going against the will. And but that gives you some framework is better than none. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Yeah. Just having the conversation is huge. I've had spouses where the wife dies and the husband comes in and he sits down and he looks at me and he goes, I have no idea what she wanted.
Ugh.
I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. And you just have to take him by the hand and say, well, what do you think she would want? And he still looks at you and he says, I don't know. So then you have to go through their options. So just having the conversation is huge. It's a huge part of it, and something that I highly recommend to anybody listening. Just talk about it.
So you're in this field. So my grandfather was a Baptist minister, and I was raised up in the church, and I turned Catholic. And so do you find yourself getting involved in the religious aspect of death and how do you reconcile, or how do you deal with your own views about death and what happens afterwards with someone else's? Or do they always, I guess my question is, do they make that clear to you when you first meet them and talk about what's going to happen and what kind of service? Is that laid out on the table and you didn't have to try to maybe moderate or adjust your own beliefs and opinions to kind of get them what they want?
Yeah, so when you have a family come in, it's not about me and my beliefs. It's definitely about them, and they are paying you for a service. They're paying you to provide a service. They're paying you to care for their loved one and help honor their life. So for me, it's really easy to put aside my own personal beliefs and just help them honor theirs. It's a part of the job. They teach us a little bit about that in school. We take classes about world cultures and history and religious beliefs.
I never thought of that. I guess if you culturally, then there's certain things. Okay, you just now, I that's something I never thought of. So culturally, even not just religious, but just cultural. You set aside religion. There's different cultures handle death and preparation of the aftercare and all of that differently, right?
Yeah. So when I was a student, our funeral home, we helped out with the Hmong community. And we also helped out with Muslim burials and funeral traditions. So for Muslim, they had one wooden casket that we kept at the funeral home. And it was very simple, like literally just a pine box with handles on it. But my job would be to bring the deceased to their place of worship, and I would drop them off. Women take care of women, men take care of men. They do a washing of the body, they wrap the body in a white cloth, and then I come back later and the body is already in that wooden casket coffin that they've made, and then I meet them at the cemetery the next day. They come, they take the casket, and then they place the person's body directly into the earth. So there's no casket. They have special cemeteries they go to, and I am happy to help them and honor however their wishes were in life and in death. And it's again, it kind of goes back on that therapeutic part of the job, to be able to help them with fulfilling their wishes.
That's something I absolutely never thought of, is the different cultural aspects of that entire process. So you really have to be in tune with that so as not to offend anyone. And
Yep. And if you're new, we're going to give you the scoop. We're going to sit down like as a team, as funeral directors, and just say, hey, this is how they do it. This is why they do it that way. So we do like little pep talks at the funeral home too, just if there's new staff.
oh, so you do like you do pregame it, right?
Yeah.
You sit around and say, okay, cool. So when they initially come in, I know I've always had beef with my own personal experience. Um, you are business. You have to make money. You can't do this stuff for free. Just like any service related business, you've got to be mindful of that. So when someone comes in to prepare or to talk to you about those things, the casket and the service and all of those things that cost money, at what point do you say, well, how much money would you like to spend? Or, I mean, how does that conversation go?
It when you do this for some time, it just kind of casually flows. I mean, when you sit down and you say what are the plans? I mean, if they hadn't pre-planned, you have to sit down and you talk to them before they get to the funeral home, so you kind of have an idea if they wanted a cremation or if they wanted to do a burial or if they just wanted, a cremation followed by burial. It depends. So you already have that conversation with them. They know that there's going to be a bill. They know that there's a bill. They know that they're calling us to provide a service. So by the time that they come into the funeral home, they've usually had that conversation with the siblings, with the spouses, or they just show up with their checkbook. Usually, if you got little old lady, she's got the checkbook.
And sometimes there's insurance involved, in which case you maybe will take it based on the
Hmm.
insurance and then ask them to, you'll have to probably keep calling, because I've gotten calls from funeral directors saying, hey, when's their insurance coming through and all of that.
Yeah, and we even have companies that we partner with now that will forward the life insurance, like the proceeds, on behalf of the family, and they take a fee.
So you don't have to wait for,
Hmm.
oh, good idea. Good job. So that way you get your money.
Yep. So and the reason why we have to be asked to be paid right away is there's a lot of cash advance items, especially when you have a traditional funeral. Like the pastor isn't going to wait to get paid. The lady that plays piano, she's not waiting to get paid. The grave digger, the cemetery, um, there's a lot of other outside fees other than the funeral home that we will put together all on one bill to help save the family from having to write a check over here, write a check over there. It's just for convenience. So those cash advance items can get expensive and people don't want to wait. So that's what companies like that other one with the life insurance where they forward it are really convenient.
So I guess then too, so the upsell, okay, when you're involved, there's an upsell. There's casket A that is basic and nice, and then there's casket B that maybe is a little nicer than casket A, and then there's casket C, which is the Cadillac of caskets. And I remember I went through this discussion with my mother-in-law had passed, and so I went with my wife to the funeral home, and this gentleman said, now we know her, and she was a lovely lady, and she would really like to be put away in a really nice casket.
Oh.
Oh yeah, he was trying to do the upsell before we even got, and we were on a budget, which facts are that's what happens. People are on a budget,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew what the budget was, and so I looked at some of the books, and when we looked at these lower grade books, and he said this phrase several times. She wanted a nice one, and these are some nice ones. And finally, I said, "May I ask you? I'm assuming that you would not have anything here at your place of business that wasn't nice. I'm assuming they're all nice." He said, "Yes." I said, "So if they're all nice, then it doesn't matter if I pick from book A, book B, or book C." He said, "You're correct."
Yeah, exactly.
And it was very uncomfortable, because you feel like a heel when you talk about the finances and trying to save money. And it was just a weird experience. So is that what you have encountered?
So where you typically might find people trying to upsell you on the sale of a casket is going to be a corporate owned funeral home. Not all of them, but some of them, they have sales and numbers and places they need to be each quarter. And so that pressure comes down onto the funeral home employees. Now, and I know that because I've had friends that have worked for these types of funeral homes. I have worked for only family firms for funeral homes. And my dad in particular in Wisconsin, we have a casket showroom, but we don't keep thousands and thousands of dollars worth of super fancy Cadillac caskets there because in small town USA, they're not going to spend that. So we would have that casket forever. And then the other thing that we like to tell families is that at the end of the day, all of those caskets are going to do the same job. They're all going to get buried right into the ground. So whether you spend a thousand, whether you spend a couple thousand, you're going to see it for a little while and then it's going to get buried. So I never want somebody to overspend or feel or regret that decision. And I prefer that method of selling caskets because it doesn't affect me. It doesn't affect my salary. It doesn't affect my numbers. I just want them to be happy with their purchase. And if I've had families, they come in and, my mom, what's the cheapest one? What's the cheapest one? My mom would be so mad. She'd be rolling in her grave if I spent too much. And I show them and it doesn't matter to me which one they pick. And there's so much pressure around picking that for somebody.
It's
selecting
horrible.
that
I went through it.
choice.
It was horrible because I felt for my wife, and I'm the analytical guy, and I felt for her. And at the same time, you didn't want to feel because it makes you feel like you're a cheapskate. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, and
The psychology that's
they are
involved.
all nice. Yep, and they all do the same job. I had a family, they're like, can we bury my dad in a cardboard box? Because he always joked that he wanted to be buried in a cardboard box. I made it happen. We have cremation containers with lids, and we put that inside of the vault at the cemetery. That's what he wanted. And I'm happy to, I prefer, I couldn't imagine having to sell a family on a casket. Oh, how about this one? This one, it reminds me of Bernie. Did you ever see the movie Bernie?
The Weekend at
He's
Bernie's.
like, well, this one,
One of my
yeah.
favorites. So and that's just bizarre how the psychology of it is. And those people that know how to sell, that's what they know. They know the psychology of it, and it's an uncomfortable, and they can probably press you on an upsell.
Yeah, it gives me the ick. I hate that so
And
much.
and as a matter of business, if I'm thinking business, you want that person in their greatest time of need to have a good experience. And as much as you can have a good experience, you want them to reflect later on when they're back home in their kitchen at their coffee table. You want them to be thinking, oh, damn, I hated to lose them, but Jesus, they were really nice there. That funeral home was wonderful. Lauren was fantastic. You want that conversation because that's your calling card, right? That's return business, right?
And I heard this the other day. Somebody might not remember what you said to them, but they're going to remember how you made them feel.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So if you make them feel like their opinions matter and that their feelings matter, they're going to be able to tell if you're genuine or if you are just trying to sell them on something. So I'm glad that I have never worked and never plan to work in an environment like that, because I couldn't do it.
So we've covered a lot of the nuts and bolts of this, so I want to kind of get to some little more crazy things. My mind thinks differently. So I looked at some of your content, and I honestly never thought of this before. So I'm scrolling through, and I see that you all, I don't think this is probably wrong, but you'll correct me. It's a collection of things, of parts. I never thought of hip replacements and those kind of things when someone's cremated, that those things are there. I never thought of that. So the question is, like, I think you did one on someone had asked a question, do IUDs get burned up? Which is, never thought of that. So what is the most bizarre things that you have come across in the cremation process?
The one thing that I was not expecting that I found was surgical equipment. Like scissors and clamps. So it was
That's a malpractice case right there.
Well, I think what happened, and I wish I would have looked more into it at the time, but it was busy and I think that they died during surgery.
Oh, no.
And they had all the clamps and everything and they just left them. And I think that is definitely, that was one of the, whoa, what did I just find here? But I have.
So the person probably died on the operating table and they just closed them up without even thinking of taking that crap out?
They just left it. Yep.
That's nuts.
And when I get them back to the funeral home, if the family doesn't request to see them, I mean, they're pretty good at the morgue at taking the personal belongings off. So I don't reopen the body bag that they came back to the funeral home in. And I'm definitely not going to open the cavity if I don't have permission to handle the person in that way. Sometimes families slip things into the casket and you have to be really careful and kind of check before, and see what they'll put glass bottles in there. They'll slide, lighters. I've had people do popcorn kernels. Those don't survive cremation. I'll leave them in there.
Pack of smokes. My father was just this chronic smoker, and he passed from a heart attack due to smoking, but she put a damn pack of Marlboro in his casket. And I said, what are you doing? I mean, that's just stupid.
We put a Snickers bar in with my grandpa. I like knowing, that he's got that in with him. Yeah, he would love that. Yeah,
a little snacky.
Yeah, a little snacky.
So tell me like, if you had to pick your let's say top two things that you were not totally expecting, other than the clamps. You said the clamps, you weren't expecting those, but what other kind of implements have you seen that just you thought, oh my God?
I have found remnants of breast implants that I wasn't expecting on the bottom of the crematory floor. Yeah, they're just kind of a little goopy and you scrape it out. Something else that I didn't realize that you have to kind of learn the hard way is we can't cremate leather because the leather will turn like green and then it'll stain the floor of the crematory. So
no kidding.
Yeah. So we don't cremate leather, and we typically try not to cremate plastic either because it just can be harmful to the machine.
So leather, is that like with someone's dress or their clothing? Like they want daddy to be buried in a certain type of clothing, you know?
Yeah, biker jackets. Me
Oh,
and biker jackets, we have beef. Yeah.
no kid. And so you probably have families that are just like animate. Daddy loved Harley Davidson. He was member of a biker club, and by God, he's going to be buried in this jacket, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what do you do?
You just got to be upfront. I just have to tell them, those things have plastic, that's glass, that's a leather jacket. And unfortunately, I can't do that. But if you have maybe he had his favorite Green Bay Packer jammies. Maybe he had a pair of slippers. So we can usually find a compromise. And thankfully, not everybody wants to cremate leather jackets. So that's might be one.
You got to show her. You can say, well, we'll show it during the funeral and all
Yep.
of that,
And
maybe.
then
And then,
take it off.
and then take
Hmm.
it off. Okay, well, good. But when I come across your content and I saw that, and I think you mentioned there was an IUD that they survive, I guess, cremation.
Sometimes they do, it depends. It depends. The pacemakers, we remove those prior to cremation. And if you don't, you can hear a pop in the
The
back.
batteries,
Yeah, they'll explode. So we got to take those out.
huh?
I
I'll
have
be
for,
darned.
yeah.
So we're about ready. I want to kind of wrap up here and ask you. You've been in this business your whole life since you said 9 months old. So how has your attitude or your opinions about death particularly, and maybe let's set aside the family drama and all that stuff that we talked about, but your own personal beliefs about death and how you might choose to handle that, how has that changed from the time maybe you became actively engaged uh, working in the industry to now?
You know, I think that being around death as much as I am and how much I've seen has really changed my outcome, like my whole outlook on life, really. It really, when you're around it every day and you see people that they've just had their life cut way too short, it really puts into perspective your own life and what you want out of it and how important your family is and to raise good kids and just how important it is to talk about death too. And I think that's a part of why I started my platform was just to help normalize it and through that has really helped me come full circle. And when we talk about death, I think it really reminds us how important it is to live your life how you want to live it.
Yeah, and it's a part of what I've done in my career, with psychology. I have a master's degree in it, and and an attorney. So you look as a psychology person, you look at how people evolve. And so I have my own life about death is you reach this point at which, depending on what theorist you believe, but you reach this point of self-actualization where you want no unfinished business.
Mm-hmm.
And so the goal is, and I have taken this in my own personal life, is to try to every day not have any unfinished business, because there's been times when I was very sick, when I laid down, I honestly did not believe that I was going to wake up in the morning. Had that thought many, many times for 6 months or so before I had a kidney transplant. I would lay down believing, and I told my wife, I'm not sure that I'm going to wake up. And so I I started at that point just trying not to have any unfinished business. And that's kind of, you live your life, do the most you can do, have as positive an impact on the individuals that you surround yourself with. And I think that's all you can do, right?
Yeah, I think that if more people lived their life that way, where just letting people live their life and what they choose to do, I feel like the world would be a better place, honestly. Because there's so many things that the public and society gets so hung up on other people and how they choose to live their life and their decisions they make. And if we talked more about death and how important it is for everybody to have that pursuit of happiness, I feel like the world would just be a little brighter.
So I try to live my life. There's balance there, like with what we both talked about. There's a balance there, though, because you have a lot of people that will say, well, you got to live your life like there's no tomorrow. Well, yeah, maybe, yeah. But the other part of that is like, you've got to live your life full on. You got to do your job. You've got to try to do the things that you know are productive, because if you live it like there's no tomorrow, you might be surprised that there is a tomorrow, and you've got to be prepared, right? So there is that there between doing those things that you know you need to do where there's no unfinished business, but at the same time doing what you absolutely need to do in order to be productive and feel good about yourself. So do you find that particular balance hard?
Um, I think for everybody, it can be hard to balance. I don't know that being around death makes me special or makes me better at it, but it's definitely shaped the decisions and where I've ended up today. I can happily say that.
Yeah. I don't buy green bananas anymore. I've got some health issues, so I go to the store. I'm like, shit, I can't buy these green bananas, man. I'm on a short.
What if I don't make it till Friday?
I'm on a short string here, man. So my outlook has definitely changed, as an attorney, seeing death and all of that, and then individually coming close in my own life and being surrounded by it, as just humans are. I don't buy green bananas, but other than that, I do try to live my life full on and try not have any unfinished business, man. I've come so people that knew me in my 30s and that know me now in my 60s, they can't believe it. But that's the evolution of humans. I think if you're smart, you move and you change, and hopefully it's for the better.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we didn't talk about is your lawsuit. So I'm going to mention just briefly. You are engaged. You are a TikTok and social media personality, and as an attorney, I will not ask you to comment on your pending case, but it's actually quite good. I think it involves some people trying to besmirch your credibility and your good name. And I think that will process itself, but wanted to just let people know, follow you, look at your content. If you are in the stage or you've got a loved one that, death is, nearer. I mean, we all can't never guess, but we do know when you're 80, death is probably closer to you than when you're 30. So give people now how they can reach out to you and look at your content.
So yeah, on all of my handles, I'm Lauren the Mortician. I am on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. I have a newer YouTube channel, and I also have a Patreon where I have my own little podcast as well. Been doing this for a couple of years. I'd love to have you if you are into death positive content. If you have morbid curiosity, we talk about a little bit of everything.
Well, listen, it has been an absolute treat. I mean this. I'm not blowing smoke up your rear end, as we say out here in the hills. I'm really happy that you agreed to come on. I'd like to have you on later. We'll discuss some of these other matters if it's okay with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I just really thank you very much for having faith in what we're doing here and grow our channel. We got this channel here where Katie and I have worked on this for a while, and we're growing. And I want you to be part of it, and I'll consider you a friend and part of the family here, and maybe have you back for something else.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'd love to do that anytime.
All right, guys. As I always say at the end, my name's Eugene, and this is Life and Law. And I always tell people, when life and law collide in your world, and it will, go ahead and give me a holler. Thank you, Lauren.
Turn me around, help me to the door. I'll never make it on my own. Turn me